Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, I'm going to do this fun little vinyl tag for 2023. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check those out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music weekly playlist we put together, and also the Patreon page. So make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So if you're unfamiliar with what these vinyl tags are, the beginning of every year, the last several years, the vinyl community, we all do these different lists. This one is actually from Rob Walker over Let the Music Play. I'll put a link down below if you want to go check out Rob's channel. But it's just a list of 20 questions. That's just a fun kind of way to show off some music and just kind of kick the year off. But anyway, the first one on the list, this says favorite new release of 2022. If you guys watched my my video from last week, of course you know that album is Impera by Ghost. I was never a big Ghost fan. Ian actually was trying to get me to check out Ghost the last couple of years, and I kind of casually listened to him, but you know, when Impera came out last year, I was just kind of blown away by it. It was just a fantastic album. I've definitely dug into more of their stuff since picking up this album, but definitely my number one of 2022. So the second question is the last band or solo artist that you saw live, and actually I kind of had to think about it. I saw several. I went to several concerts last year, but I think the last one I went to, I took my kids. We went and saw My Chemical Romance back in September, and they're a band I've loved for a long time. The Black Parade's one of my favorite albums from the 2000s, and this was like their reunion tour that they were doing. And they did a great job. It's probably not my favorite concert that I've been to, but it's maybe I think it was a great show. I think we just didn't have the best seats, but it was great to see them live finally. I could have went a bunch of different directions with the third question, but that is their first album was their best, and for me, it's probably I had to pick probably my favorite debut album of all time. Of course, that is Appetite for Destruction. Well, it's probably I shouldn't say probably it is one of my top 5 favorite albums of all time. When this album came out, I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it completely changed my musical outlook. And I've been a huge fan of Guns N' Roses ever since, but they never really quite lived up to their debut album. So I kind of had a hard time with the fourth one. The fourth one was show a hat trick, so you had to have a record, CD, and cassette of the same album. I don't have a lot of cassettes, and the couple of cassettes I do have, I either don't have it on CD or don't have it on vinyl. So I kind of went a little bit different route. My hat trick, probably my favorite, I shouldn't say probably, it definitely is my favorite album of all time. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. I've got it on vinyl. I've got it on CD. Actually, I've got like 9 copies of it on vinyl, I think. I think I've got probably 4 different versions of it on CD. And then, of course, I've got the SACD for it also. So that's my hat trick. Number 5 was another question I kind of had a difficult time finding a record for, but it is album that starts and ends with the same letter. And I kind of had to rack my brain over this one. Actually, I had to scroll through Discogs to find one. But that's Pump by Aerosmith. Just a great album. It's definitely my favorite Aerosmith album. Even though I do love Toys in the Attic is probably my number 2 favorite Aerosmith album. It's probably really close behind Pump, but just a great album. And number 6 is one that I kind of had a hard time with also, and that is Born in the Same Year as You. I was born in 1979, so I had to kind of dig through the internet because nothing really came to mind right away. And I did find out that Benji and Joel Madden were both born in the same year as me, so of course I went with Good Charlotte, The Young and the Hopeless. Great album, and this is actually getting reissued here. Supposedly here, I think in January or February, I think it's supposed to be getting a Urban Outfitters reissue that has been sold out for a long time. But it's a great album, great band, and one that I just added to my collection probably about a year and a half ago. This is actually a really hard album to find. Number 7 is the most listened to album in 2022. This might actually surprise some people out there, but my most listened to album is this great greatest hits collection by Lionel Richie. I guess I should give you a little background or a little backstory to it. But I work every other weekend, so the week my off weekends, I normally wake up in the morning on Sunday morning, and I toss on this great Lionel Richie compilation and just kind of do some work here in my office while I'm trying to get my day going. But I love this album. I grew up listening to Lionel Richie, huge Lionel Richie fan, but it's a great album. So at number 8 is your most listened to artist in 2022. If you're part of the Facebook group, if you follow me on Instagram, it's probably no big surprise. That artist definitely is Youngblood. I've been a huge fan of him the last couple of years. This is his self-titled album that came out back in September. Since this came out, it's probably my most played album, but his previous album, which is called Weird, came out back in 2019. It's probably my most played album of the last probably 5 years. Probably I've listened to that, especially I've got it on CD. It was like in my CD player in my car, probably nonstop for a solid probably 3 months this year. But great artist, great album, and I'm actually going to see him here. I think it's June or July when I'm going to see him in concert, and I can't wait. So question 9 is an Australian band or artist. I think there's only one that I've got in my collection that I could talk about, and I love this band. I've been a huge fan for a long time. Of course, that is Silverchair. As a kid that was a teenager in the 90s, of course, I loved all the alternative and grunge in probably the first, early part of the 90s to the mid part of the 90s, and Silverchair was definitely right up in there. Frog Stomp's an incredible album. Really, all of their albums are really great albums, and if you listen to them back to back, there's a great progression through Silverchair's discography that you really see how they grew as musicians, especially since they were only like 15 years old when they recorded Frog Stomp. Question number 10 is a surprise purchase in 2022. There's a couple of different ways I could have went with that. I decided to go with what ended up actually being my number 2 album of the year, and that is Holy Fuck by Demi Lovato. I know it's Demi Lovato, and people automatically get this like pop vibe from her. Not at all with this album. This is a very, very rock-centric album, very hard rock album. And I would say if you're a fan of like Pretty Reckless and what they've done with their last couple of albums, you might actually like this. Demi Lovato has been very pop for most of her career. Even though her first couple of albums were rock albums, but she went, very like hardcore pop through most of her career. This is very different than anything she's done before. Question 11 is an artist or band that you're complete on. I could have went a bunch of different directions because I'm a completist for a bunch of different bands like, Blink-182, Pink Floyd, Queen, Ozzy, Black Sabbath. There's a lot of bands I'm really complete on. I don't have all the Black Sabbath albums, but hopefully I will once they release that Tony Martin box set later this year. So the one I end up going with is a band that not only am I complete on all of their studio albums, I'm also a completist when it comes to their live material, and I'm trying to be a completist when it comes to all their 45s that they've released over the years too, but I'm not fully, there's a couple that I'm still looking for, but for the most part, I'm a completist on them. The band, of course, is MXPX, one of my favorite bands of all time, and, one that, as far as like, if I were to pick one band that I probably listened to the most over the last 25 years, it'd probably be MXPX. Question 12 is a run of 3 great albums. Initially, I was going to go with Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and Animals, which I think is actually, I could have even thrown The Wall in there. I think as far as album sales go, it's probably the 4 greatest albums of all time. But since I already talked about Dark Side of the Moon, I decided to go a different way. Another one of my favorite bands. You got Enema of the State, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, and their Untitled album from 2003. Just a great run of just probably 3 of the greatest pop punk albums of all time. Question 13 is a 80s soundtrack. I decided to pick one of my favorite 80s movies, and I went with Back to the Future. This is actually the Mondo reissue that came out a couple years back. The artwork looks absolutely awesome on this thing, and I actually did a whole video on it, but this is the DeLorean Gray, I think is what they called the vinyl, but it's just a great album, great soundtrack, and a great movie. Question 14 is We Lost Them in 2022. There's a bunch of great musicians that we lost last year. One that was probably, hit me the hardest was the loss of Taylor Hawkins. So I went with my favorite album that he was on, Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters. This is, if you haven't heard this album, if you're only familiar with the first couple of Foo Fighters albums. Wasting Light is hands down the best thing that Foo Fighters ever released, at least in my opinion. Question 15 is a disappointing purchase in 2022. And I kind of had a hard one with this because I didn't buy anything that I was really all that disappointed in last year. Even though I did blind buy several albums, I ended up liking everything that I bought. So the disappointment actually comes from how bad the quality control was on this album. But the album is Stormfront by Billy Joel. This album is so warped. It's got to be one of the most warped albums I've ever bought. And it was really disappointing because it's an album I've been looking for a long time. I probably should pick up another copy of it. But I was just so disappointed on how warped this album was that I should say that it's not so warped that it affects the playback of the album. That's actually why I ended up deciding to keep it. But it still looks terrible how warped it is. So question 16 is a non-vinyl purchase, and I actually just picked these up just recently. I could have went a bunch of different directions, but I decided to go with a couple of CDs, even though I've actually kind of already talked about this album a little bit. But the CDs are Take Off Your Pants and Jacket by Blink-182, came out back in 2001. And what's really cool about these is when the album first came out back in 2001, there was 3 different versions of it that were released. And they were released in these digipacks. And there's also a standard jewel case version of it that came out. And what I didn't realize until several years later was each of the 3 versions had different unreleased tracks on them. So these CDs have actually gotten pretty hard to find. And when you do find them on Discogs and eBay and things like that, they actually go for pretty decent amount of money. They're normally in the $25 to $40 range. I've seen some of these go for. And I was having a hard time tracking them down because I didn't want to pay a whole lot of money for it because, I mean, to be completely honest, I've already got, I think 4 or 5 different versions of it on vinyl. I've got several versions of it on CD also. So I didn't want to pay a whole lot of money. I really didn't want to pay $20 a piece for them. So what I did was I went on Amazon and went in the used section on Amazon and found where people were talking about, they'll list the album and then there's a quick description of it. So I looked for the description where they talked about the cardboard sleeve being in good condition. So really I only paid like $3 for each one of these. But so I did manage to find the red takeoff version. And then my favorite is the yellow pants version. There's a couple of tracks. The one track on that's on here, I won't say the name of it, but it has something to do with a dog. It's one of the most disgusting songs you'll probably hear, at least rock songs in a while, or punk songs. But the other hidden track on here, What Went Wrong, is probably one of my favorite Blink-182 tracks. Just a great song, and I'm glad to finally have it on CD. Question 17 is you found a grail. I could have picked a couple of different ones here, but this one I've been looking for probably the last 3 or 4 years easily, maybe even longer than that. But that is the 40th anniversary box set for Aqualung by Jethro Tull. This came out back in 2011. And the cool thing is about this is this was also released as they've released this in multiple different versions. There's like a CD booklet version, then there was the vinyl release, and also this box set that had everything combined in it. And I was actually, for my anniversary earlier last year, my wife and I went down to Miami for, just like a long weekend, and I found this record store down there. And from the outside of the record store, you thought it was an abandoned building. It was like, it's a like dumpy looking building in this like industrial kind of part of Miami. And I went in and found a bunch of great stuff in there, the stuff that I hadn't seen in years. And they had a copy of this. But it was a little bit more than I wanted to pay for the condition that it was in. It was a little beat up. There was a lot of like wear on the outside of the jacket. And I ended up hopping on Discogs and just happened to find one for almost the same value plus shipping, but it was actually in mint condition. So I was really glad to finally have a copy of this. Question 18 is a space-themed sleeve or song. One popped into my head right away. Of course, that is Angels and Airwaves, Love Part 1. Actually, Love Part 2 is getting reissued today if you're watching it on the day this video comes out. But a great album. The Love and Part 1 and Love Part 2 have been out of print for years and years and go for quite a bit of money. So I was glad to see this finally get reissued late last year, but it's just a great album. Question 19 is show some VCLT or a present. If you're unfamiliar with what VCLT is, stands for Vinyl Community Love Train. It's basically where people just send each other records, which I think is really cool. I've gotten some really cool stuff over the years, but I decided to go with a present that I just recently got. My wife actually got me this for Christmas, but it is the Misfits We Are 138 bootleg. I've actually wanted this for a long time. This is actually 2 different live sets. It's a San Francisco from 1981, which sounds great. And then there's a Detroit show from 83 that sounds like it was recorded in a guy's pocket, but it was really kind of cool to have it on vinyl. This is the Detroit show was just a couple of months before the band actually broke up. So it's just something I've wanted for a while. I'm a big Misfits fan, and it's a cool one to spin. And then last but not least, show an album from 1973. So an album that's celebrating a 50th anniversary this year. A bunch of great stuff came out in 73. I mean, I could have went in a number of different directions. I decided to go with my favorite Rolling Stones album of all time, Goat's Head Soup. And this is one that, the funny thing is, I wasn't a huge fan of the Rolling Stones until I'd say probably the last 5 or 6 years. I've been getting more and more into their stuff. And this is an album that I didn't, of course I knew a bunch of tracks off here, but I never really sat down and listened to the whole album until probably 2 or 3 years back, and absolutely love it. It's one that, it's probably, I'd say, in my top 10 albums of all time. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. I just love doing these vinyl tag videos. These are fun to do every year. It's a great way to show off and talk about some albums that maybe I don't get to talk about very often now, but like I said, these are fun. I've been doing them the last couple of years. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about any of these albums, or maybe some of your picks for some of those questions. But if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.